Good afternoon, Amrita, and good evening, everybody here in India. Majha House, a literary and cultural platform set up in our home in Amritsar, is absolutely delighted to welcome a very special guest this evening, Professor Kaushik Basu. Professor Basu's new book, Policymakers Journal, From Delhi to Washington, D.C., which I have here with me, is insightful, irreverent, wise, introspective, and above all, humorous. It's a journal, it's a diary with a diary's immediacy, a record of impressions of the moment, as he says in his preface, that he tried to stay true to the original spirit of a diary. As the former chief economic advisor to the government of India, he gives readers a peek into the interiors of a policymaker's world. He shows us various world leaders, and he describes encounters with world leaders as well as influencers of different kinds. And through it all, and I have to say that this book is an absolute page turner, um, there is also a huge amount of delicious wit and irreverence. So it's a really enjoyable book. He himself comes through as logical and clear-headed, creative, analytical, philosophical, and very real. There is work, and there are hard decisions to be made on the fiscal, front, and lots of policy matters. But alongside, there is enjoyable, pleasurable travel. There's music, there's dance, there's coffee and long walks, and there's a lot of museums, and there's art. So for me personally, it's also been a way to reinforce my own convictions that what we need in this country is a leader who, to use the lines from the book, does not give an inch to building up his own image and legacy. We need a system of politics and governance that is not insecure, that one should be able to freely criticize the political head of a nation and engage with him or her on important critical matters. The other thing that I found sort of sad and worrying, and which I think I'd like to point to, is that Indian journalists are an impressive lot. He says that in the book. And they are well informed, they are engaged, and they don't hesitate to cross-examine the government. So what's happened to us now? I mean, we hear of this Godi media all the time, and we are watching news which gives you no news really, but it's just a lot of talking heads almost every evening when we switch on the television. So what has changed so drastically in the country and around us today makes me sad, makes me also worry, because in a few years we seem to have come a long way. To introduce him and to question him, we have with us Amrita Dhillon, Professor of Economics in the Department of Political Economy at King's College, London. Her training is in theoretical modeling, including political economy, public economics, game theory, and development. I'm not going to go further now, and I just ask Amrita to take over from here, introduce Professor Basu, and then let's get into the conversation. Thank you once again to both of you for being here.
Thank you, Preeti, and thank you, Majha House, and all the organizers for this opportunity to interview Kaushik on his new book. I think the introduction has already been done very well for the book. I'll just say a little bit about Kaushik. People are definitely familiar with him in his stint as chief economic advisor in India from 2009 to 12, and subsequently in the World Bank. But probably there are a lot of people probably in the audience who are also students of Kaushik, as I was once in the Delhi School of Economics. He's, of course, a rather famous figure in the economics profession and is quite well known even before he took on these two jobs. His interests are really wide-ranging, from highly technical formal models of game theory to development economics, law and economics, and most recently, philosophy. He's a professor at Cornell University. He's a president of the International Economic Association and has many other accolades. So I thoroughly enjoyed the book. Preeti already talked a lot about you gave an introduction to the book that was quite detailed. So let me just get to the questions very quickly and let's hear from him. I must say that I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. The first thing that comes across in the book is your personality. Um, as Preeti said, it comes across, you come across as very intelligent, humorous, and very, very relaxed, despite the inevitable high pressure of long days in the office and a lot of travel, and not to mention the possibility of various diplomatic faux pas. So I would like you to talk a little bit about your personality, your philosophy of life, that everyone is basically programmed to do what they do, and therefore there's no point in getting angry with anyone. Can you elaborate a bit with some examples of high pressure situations that you handle with these and that you describe in the book?
Amrita, thank you very much. Preeti, thank you very much. And Majha House, I have said in many places, maybe even in my diary, that I feel in the long run, a nation's real strength depends on soft power, much more than hard power. Yes, you need hard power, but the soft power, the arts and the culture and the thinking of the mind, that's what puts a nation at the top. United States has used that in a big way. And Majha House represents that soft power tradition in the best possible ways. So Preeti, thank you, not just for calling me to speak to Majha House, but for doing this very organization and institution. And Amrita, before I jump in case there are viewers who joined a bit late, I should again repeat what she very briefly mentioned. She was once my student at the Delhi School of Economics. Not that that affects anything, but if at some point she suddenly gets very aggressive, it may be because she remembers one mark that she was supposed to get, which she did not get in Delhi School many years ago. But she is one of the most distinguished economic theorists in the world today. Amrita, let me jump in straight away to the question and broadly that you're raising. Personality-wise, I don't know. You know, intelligence, I have to say, we are in a profession where you see phenomenal intelligence. And I say, I feel humbled by there are some people who are just so quick and intelligent. My thing, which has helped me hugely in the world of research and maybe also in policy, is I'm quite obsessive. So once something interests me, it absorbs my mind altogether, which is good and bad because I don't take in other information at that time because my mind is completely locked into that one thing. But I can carry, I mean, in my research days, I would carry an idea in my head, go to sleep with it, wake up with it. That really helps. In government, since that's what the diary is about, my period in government, that trait probably did help because I would get interested in the substantial problems. The problems are never as intellectually intricate as in research, but they can be intricate enough. And I tend to get hooked onto that. And that really helps me. And it is true. One thing I will agree with you, which you're saying as praise, is generally I've been calm. And through it's not all the time. There are, of course, some days and times which are upsetting. But in government, in the World Bank, when I would see other people, senior vice presidents and others really upset, for me, I would be upset in the meeting or something, but I would walk out of, in the World Bank, very vivid memories of some days of very nasty meetings, but I would walk out of the building and toss it all out of my head, what had happened in the bank, to pick it up again next morning when I come back to the bank. That I can't take credit for it because I'm somewhat programmed to do that. I'm just lucky. That gives me a good night's sleep no matter what happens. And it really allows me to function. But I can give one tip about something, which in fact, I'm thinking that maybe my next book should be about it. That is reasoning inside my head. I do a lot of that. And I feel that if we follow the principle of complete clarity inside your head, there is no political correctness, wrongness inside your head. You take in all the facts, all the reasons, and reason inside your head. Almost game theory inside your head, if you do. I feel that helps a lot. I do that a lot. And my next, I shouldn't say book because I'm getting committed. I've been toying around with this for a while, it should be called something like Reason to be Happy. use reasoning in your head in order to get happiness. I mean, there are situations where one needs counseling, etc. But there's also a lot you can solve if you're honest with yourself, think through clearly. And one philosophical point of view that you alluded to, my belief in determinism, that is, of course, one person's belief vis-a-vis another person's belief. This has helped me in a very big way. And some of my icons, philosophically prominent characters that I admire, David Hume most prominently, was, unlike most philosophers, was a very peaceful person. He was a very happy person, controversial because he was an atheist, he took positions that were against the positions of the time, but he was generally a happy human being through life. And in many ways, he led a very boring life, but he was happy. And actually, when he's dying also, he has a last party. This is of interest to economists. The last party, when he knows he's going to die, he's called Adam Smith, his dear friends. And he announces that my enemies will be very unhappy to know that I'm actually happy, even in confronting death. That was David Hume. Now, one philosophical side, I'm explaining this may be of interest to viewers. I do believe that the world is determined. It's a complicated viewpoint. Don't jump to conclusion on that, but human beings are what they are. They've got their genes, they've got their environment, they've become what they are. So our attitude to other human beings should be the way we handle, say, even if it's a very bad human being, a tiger is about to attack. You don't get angry with the tiger. You do things to stop that. It has to be very harsh steps, but you don't get angry. A tiger will do what a tiger has been genetically coded from environment the tiger is going to do. I do carry that, which may be nice for other people to know or not very nice. I have to ask my wife how she reacts to the fact that I do treat the universe as deterministic. And determinism is a philosophical viewpoint that right from the time of the Greeks, the Stoics, through the famous Jewish philosopher Maimonides to Hume, a whole lot of people have taken. And since I am modest and not being modest, I'm being honest, I don't think I'm very intelligent, but one thing is true, that this philosophical position I had reached before I read any philosophers. So in my in college, in St. Stephen's College, I had begun to take this position. Then I discovered that there's a whole slew of philosophers who have taken exactly this line. It reinforced me, and actually it has helped me in life. And maybe in the next book, which is not the topic today, I will go into that. And situations of tense, etc. I don't know, in government, if you want me to go into now, or you want meetings, discussions, ideas, I can do that, or I can wait.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting to know. Of course, there's the challenge. I mean, most of us would not be happy, because it seems like it's a call for inaction. I mean, if you think everything is just predetermined, there's, anger is a source of energy. But anyway, let's move on to another thing you sort of touch on in the book, which is about the tension between your motivation for choosing economics as a field of study and the job of chief economic advisor. So how do you resolve this tension? I mean, your hat as an intellectual, very wedded to game theory, to logic and reasoning, and then having to face these situations where you have to convince other people of policies.
Yeah. Before I get into this again on anger, there is a little bit in my book where I say I need anger management counseling I should go for, taking exactly the view that you're giving. I feel anger plays very useful roles, and I feel at times bad that I don't have that in me. So I said it jokingly that I need anger counseling to give me some anger. Take me away from the determinist viewpoint is what I write in my book. Yeah, so I agree with you fully over there. It has its valuable parts to it. But come back to this now. In the Indian government, coming in from the rarefied world of academe, I hope I didn't get your question, and then into this rough and tumble and handling, right? That's what you were asking. It was cutting off for a moment. No, yes, I was very worried about that transition myself. And another thing which you will probably appreciate is that academics is a very flat world. There is really no boss and no one answering to you. It's a very flat world. It survives that way. It'll be the same for you in England. It's the same in America. And if you remember Delhi School of Economics, and going back to Delhi School of Economics, it's a very flat place. The head of the department and the director, I did not have to bow and scrape in front of anyone. From that world, coming into this hierarchy of government was difficult. At one level, you understand government, in order to function, has to have a hierarchy. So it is there. But there was an adjustment involved in that, coming into this space. And so much so that one of the reasons I took to the diary writing was my feeling very early that right in the beginning, first 2-3 weeks, maybe a few months, really, and I'm not saying this to exaggerate, I felt, if without causing embarrassment to Dr. Manmohan Singh, since he had invited me into this job, I could run away back to academics, I would really happily do so. I would just quit and go. I was not liking this world. And since you know it's a common friend, very early there was a letter from Ariel Rubinstein. To him, I was writing about something, very famous game theorist. I wrote saying, Ariel, I'm detesting my job. Feel like going back, politics is not where I belong. He wrote back to me very sweetly saying that on your worst days, keep thinking about departmental politics, which can be pretty nasty, and you'll find Indian politics a bit more tolerable. So I took to diary writing almost as a therapy. But what did help me, and there were a couple of moments when I had to reach out to him, was the Indian Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh. First of all, I felt he was also, there were times when he was as uncomfortable in the political world. But really, I survived in the beginning. There were times when I would go to him and complain about other top ministers. So I can't function with them. And he would tell me that, no, you have to take it on because there is a bigger mission for India. I struck a chord with him very early, realizing that, first of all, his honesty is total. He'd rather not speak than tell a lie, so he will keep quiet. So honesty is total, which is a handicap in politics if you're that honest. But people around him could trust him totally because he was completely that. Number two, his modesty, which I very often point out, and maybe echoing a little bit of what Preeti was saying in the beginning, it requires a lot of courage to be modest where you need not be modest at that position. And it was a sign of his courage. And I've got little snippets in the diary where I talk about his modesty is actually his courage. So these couple of qualities for me was very important. And though my primary interaction, of course, was with the finance minister, Pranab Mukherjee, I had, before I took on the job, I had told the Prime Minister who had asked me to do this job that I would like to have access to you at least once a month. And maybe through my nearly 3 years, he stuck to that, I stuck to that. I would go talk about policy matters with him every time I sat down. The discussion would be how to take the Indian mission, not just the economy, society further forward. And that I can tell you now that I've lived 7 years in the world of politics and policy making in India and other countries, that's very rare in a political leader. For political leader, most of the time, what politics can you do to survive and continue further in power? Never, not once would that come up. And one thing about Pranab Mukherjee, I should say, Pranab Mukherjee had the intelligence to realize that I'm not a politician. So he was a politician. He did what politicians did, but he gave that respect to me that every time I would be with him, we would be talking fiscal policy details of that kind. And one more trait of Pranab Mukherjee's, which was very special. His memory is photographic. So you will remember, Amrita, or did you overlap? You did overlap with Shukumoy Chakravarti.
Yes.
Person of phenomenal memory. Pranab Mukherjee was of that kind. He knew the British budget, the Indian budget, 1950 election. So it's embarrassing with someone with that kind of a memory. But analytically, he was not a good economist or anyone, but he would give me a hearing. So I would give him ideas. But I used Manmohan Singh for many of the novel ideas. To get them into work, I would use the Prime Minister for that. And that's what, after a few months, I was actually enjoying my job being there for those reasons, and my temperament, that through the rough and tumble and all, I remained calm, I enjoyed it.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. You talk a lot about Manmohan Singh in the book, and he's clearly a hero, a larger than life figure for you. But, you know, the opinion of most of the media, the majority of people, was that he was ineffective as a prime minister. And so that begs the question of, how are politicians elected? Isn't a job of a politician also to be, to be, to be liked by a majority, or to be elected, to be electable? So do you have anything to say about
Yes,
that?
I do have something to say. In fact, I think there is a paper there to be written that this competition to be liked more actually is a lethal competition among political leaders, because then you begin to jettison all other objectives, all other targets, in order to become more popular with the masses. So the final equilibrium which you reach is horrible politicians at the top, because all are playing the same game.
Right.
So yes, that is the game that is played, and we really need to understand the political economy of it, the hoteling model. I'm using the fact that it's Amrita I'm talking to, getting more into technicalities, needs really to be redone on that, and there's something I could talk about. But I feel there is something very important, not to play that game, even if that is politically damaging in the sense that you lose politically. And I think in many ways, the fact that the government fell, because look at it this way, that he's ineffective, that is completely wrong, I can tell you. Yes, he was not sort of looking after everything, but people say that Mrs. Gandhi would decide on policies, then it would be carried out. No, they had a lot of mutual respect, Mrs. Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi, and Manmohan Singh. But when it came to economic policies, it was Manmohan Singh just that. He is not the kind who would then go on the dais and talk about what he had done, because I've been there in situations, and I can tell you very specifically, because I generally like a lot of the left-wing activists on the ground. I would actually bring them in, who were a part of the council that Mrs. Gandhi was running. I would invite them to the Ministry of Finance, and then this was done for the first time, so I take some credit, calling them in for those high-level meetings with the finance minister before the budget. I would call in these people, trade unionists and other activists. And here is what I did get to feel, that with them, with many of the things that were done, which they would want us to do, was very different. They would want much more radical policies. But what they didn't realize is that because I sympathized with their objective, that's the kind of world I would like to build, what these radical left-wing activists want. But unless you're a bit realistic in designing it, you'll end up with a completely different world from what you're trying to create. And the world is a very difficult place. One concrete example I'll jump into, and I could come back to the topic of corruption. Corruption is something on which I spent a lot of time, thanks to the fact that the Prime Minister was also very keen. We should do things to weed it out. Activists would get very angry. Why don't you take big steps and push corruption out? But corruption is something which is woven into the legitimate economy in such an intricate way that if you try to take the corrupt parts of the economy out without being sensitive to the healthier parts of the economy, you can do a big damage to the full economy. Demonetization was a mistake, big mistake of that kind. No sensitivity was shown to legitimate economic activity, which all came to a grinding halt, trying to go after corruption. With Manmohan Singh, again, many of the things would appear that not quite as radical, but that was because he was putting his foot down, saying, you can't do that just now. You are going to mess up policies. So I think he was actually, when it comes to economic policies, very effective, but he would take in ideas from others. I do have examples of areas where I would manage to persuade him, but no, he was very effective. His criticism is he didn't go up on the rooftop and publicize the fact that he was taking decisions. And it's a great pity that people misunderstood this part, that the reason why India's growth that time, 9.9 to 10%, it was ranging. It was a global story. A large part of it was his doing, and his being sensible. He wants the progressive India, but you have to be careful. You're managing a very difficult animal called the economy.
Yes, I can see that. Yeah, and I think more and more people are coming to that conclusion even now at this stage. So besides Manmohan Singh, you spoke about other important leaders that you've met. Are there any that stand out in your memory? And especially, could you talk a little bit about your relationship with the Gandhis and what you thought, especially of Rahul Gandhi, given the opinion in the media?
Yeah. Yeah, again, I think that's a wrong opinion in the media, but I'll come to that just now. Leaders, global leaders, which that I was meeting in different places, very short meetings, so very difficult to assess. But there were people that in the short meetings I would get along with President Obama. I'm sure he won't even remember having met me, but I met him twice, and I felt it was a decent thinking person in power in America. So it was comforting meeting with him, and had a nice sense of humor. I must tell you something which, when the Indian Prime Minister was introducing me, first time when I met him in Delhi at the dinner, Manmohan Singh was walking with Obama over, making him shake hands with all the people, and I was with Tim Geithner, that time the big boss of the American economy. So Dr. Singh came up and told Obama that this is my chief economic advisor, Kaushik Basu. We've got him over from Cornell. And Obama turned to Geithner and said, you better take some tips on how to run the economy from this guy. Because the American economy that time was in a mess. It was a joke, of course, but that was it. So it was a good equation. With Sheikh Hasina, again, I can't comment on her larger politics. The Indian politicians I, of course, got to know, didn't know her well enough, but I did hit it off. It was a very exciting meeting because two of us sat with her team on one side and my World Bank team on another. This was a very controversial meeting where I did get tense because the World Bank had brought some corruption charges against not the government, but the Padma bridge that was being built. The World Bank told me, don't meet the Prime Minister. And I said, I do want to meet. Apart from anything else, I have a common language that I can speak with her. I was very keen. And, when I was in St. Stephen's College, Bangladesh was born. We from Stevens went to work with the refugees as students. So Bangladesh was prominent in my head. I broke some World Bank protocol and reached out to Sheikh Hasina and met her. Again, that was a spectacular meeting because after all the official talk, World Bank, Bangladesh details, she suddenly turned to her people and said that, could you leave the room? So I hesitated. I've not been in these kinds of meetings. I hesitated, but I thought it was natural. I turned to my World Bank people and said that, could you all leave the room because the Prime Minister wants to talk to me. For a long time after that, my World Bank people would ask, what is it that you'll discuss? Something about Padma Bridge, something about the funding? The answer is no. Sheikh Hasina switched over to Bengali. We were both speaking in Bangla, and she talked about Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, his assassination, dramatic moments. And it brought back to mind what Nick Stern told me when I was taking the job at the World Bank, that, there is a lot of loneliness at the top. And occasionally you get that from conversation. So with Sheikh Hasina also, it was a marvelous conversation where I told her about my parents watching the Bangladesh independence movement, me in college, etc. Completely personal talk for half an hour, she felt like. Coming to India, with the Gandhi, since you ask, I know Mrs. Gandhi, I knew very little. I met maybe twice, and that's there. Rahul Gandhi, I met a couple of times, but I got to know him subsequently. I do like him as a person. And once again, let me explain. I feel he's a very honest person. I do appreciate honesty. And that is there. So you can trust what he says. And one reason why people say that, is he intelligent enough? Well, he doesn't have a politician's intrigue. So if you associate intelligence with political intrigue, he's not one of them. But when I talk to him on policy matters, I feel he has a generosity. He has a genuine inclusiveness. His identity is a very, very open identity, sort of thing, values which I carry. For me, really, the human identity is number one identity. Of course, if you're running a country, it's a national identity. I felt that quality was there in Rahul Gandhi. So I like him in those ways. Will he make a good politician? Not, I really don't know. I haven't watched him closely enough doing those things the way I've watched Manmohan Singh, the way I've watched many other politicians, because with Rahul Gandhi, I would meet occasionally on other matters, cultural matters, and international speaker coming. And since we began to get along well, yes, we would chat occasionally. And again, instinctively, not a hierarchical person. So I feel it's a good person over there. And Priyanka Gandhi, I've just met once, and it's in my diary, the little episode that she's a shy person, I felt. But that's it. I don't know. I'm not able to comment.
Thanks. So moving on a little bit, since there might be some of my bureaucrat colleagues in the audience, I want to talk about a bit about the Indian bureaucracy. As you mentioned in the book, you say that the Indian bureaucracy is very talented, but yet reforms are very, very slow in India, and it seems that some policies seem to even lack common sense, like the amount of enforcement capacity that's needed to monitor online seminars, which was one of the recent policies that was taken back, or the complicated GST tax laws. I mean, I know that politics, of course, plays a role, but do you have in your book, you talk about some ideas for the bureaucracy, why it's functioning in this way, why so much talent is being wasted? How would can you discuss more about this, whatever you say in the book? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, the bureaucracy's talent, and again, in terms of pure intelligence and things like that, Amrita, just very, very high. And having gone into government, I knew that, of course, because when I was a student in Delhi University, later teaching at the Delhi school, actually Delhi school, not too many students wanted to be civil servants, but in college, undergraduate, large number, very competitive. So I knew that some of the best minds were going in over there. Having joined government, the absolute top bureaucracy, you do get impressed. Just very, very good quality minds over there. But even then I was writing and speaking about it. It's like top-notch ace drivers, getting some of the best drivers and then getting them in a traffic jam. You won't even get to see their talent. And that was the malaise of the Indian bureaucracy. Very talented people in a jam. Part of it is their fault in the philosophical deterministic sense, not quite individuals causing it, but they are a part of the system, is when you've been in a job from basically your 20s, all your life, by the time you're a senior bureaucrat, you're in your late 50s, early 60s, you've done it, you do become jaded, you do become cynical. And I feel bringing outsiders like me, like many others that came in, is very, very important. Because I was bringing in some freshness, I was excited about my job, the bureaucrats were not that. Again, they become very rule-bound. They are just following the rules, they've got used to it. And that's where I actually felt what John Maynard Keynes had said is correct. Fighting vested interests is hard enough in government. There are vested interests, businesses will come and lobby. But frozen ideas is very difficult to fight, because they've just got used to it. I'll give you one very simple example, which, again, I'm trying to remember whether it's there in my diary. Food reserves, that the government has to keep food reserves. I would get into, those days, inflation was very high. Remember food inflation? And I was trying to get the government to offload a lot of the food and cut down the reserves. And the bureaucrats would come and say that, well, there's a minimum reserve requirement, that the government has to have a certain minimum reserve. And I tried to explain to them, if you keep a minimum reserve without fail, you may as well throw the reserve out of the window. It's of no use. A minimum reserve is of use if you also know that there are times when you will cut into that. Yes. But that was a frozen idea. Little things which are obvious if you're coming from outside. And there were other things also, inflation, dampening on inflation, where actually the Prime Minister picked up some of my ideas and we did it. So that was there. So that part of the bureaucracy was frustrating. But since you're giving examples now, the GST and others, here I feel I don't know what's happening inside. I get completely baffled actually about many of the things happening. And my hunch is the bureaucrats are silenced at not being able to do, because GST is one of them, demonetization is one of them. If you sit with a Reserve Bank of India, Reserve Bank is full of just absolutely top minds. Call them and sit with it, they will warn you what it can do to the economy. Another example, the lockdown, since I was in India, in Mumbai during the lockdown, when it first happened, I thought, good, India's taken bold steps and they must have planned out over 2 days of 14 hours meeting. They've planned out everything. Migrants will be moved, this will be done, that will be done. Then you realize no such thing has been done. Where is the bureaucracy over there? So it's a very mixed feeling when I watch from outside. I do know there is talent. Whether they have suddenly gone into a cocoon or they are not allowed to speak, but the economy is in complete doldrums. This I say with some sadness, watching from America and with my American colleagues. India, which was flowering, is suddenly just completely from growth figures, unemployment figures, inflation figures, just doing bad across the board.
So you are in favor of lateral entry. Is there anything else, any other reform you would suggest?
There are many reforms that I would actually go for. How much? Well, I can give you one or two examples. The lateral entry is, I think, important. And by the way, I was the most lateral entry into the post of chief economist, because all the ones before me, I was the 14th person. Either was a bureaucrat. Early days, there were bureaucrats who would get promoted to that. Later, it would be people who have spent 2 years in government doing some job, then pulled in. Ashok Lahiri was in that category. There were people like that. I was the first person completely out of the blue brought in. I feel that is very useful. You have to bring in people who have a little bit of common sense. You can't bring in academics who will just do axioms and theorems, because you come in and you need to bring in that judgment. So I think I was a good choice that way. Balanced, I had my academic ideas, but I knew I was coming into the policy world. The other little thing I can tell you, which is nitty gritty, but I can just point out, the Indian Economic Service is very talented, really. That used to report to me. And there were people with whom, I mean, I don't want to name right now the few names. There were people I would be picking up my phone all the time from my office. Fiscal policy, I want details, come right in. They would come in, explain details. For everything that you want to know, there is someone who knows. But occasionally when I would call up state governments to discuss economic policies with the state, very well-meaning, but you realize that without the faintest idea of running an economy, and I'm not talking of complicated ideas, faintest ideas, was very troubling. And I went to see Dr. Singh and I said, can we sort of have the Indian Economic Service decentralized so that you have some 5, 6 in each state capital, top quality economic minds sitting over there, so Delhi can work with them. So those were ideas like that. There are other ideas, but details.
Yeah, that's very interesting to know, because the Indian Economic Service seems to be a really highly undervalued at the moment. Moving on a little bit, you had some ideas for the government that I want to touch upon. So one was, not that well received, which was the bribery idea about, how in the cases of petty corruption, the bribe giver should not be held liable for any wrongdoing. That had some, quite, bad political consequences. And so I just want you to talk a little bit. Was it a bit naive of you to suggest that? Do you regret it? What was your thinking on that?
And that was one area where the Prime Minister disagreed with me, my idea, and he told me that. So I can tell you, no, it's now history. No, I think I'm glad I made that point. But it was naive of me. If I had been in government longer, I would not have said it. That was my naivety. And Amrita, that was 2-3 weeks, maybe after that, was a very tense time for me, because there were letters written by members of parliament. I've got some of them with me, copies with me, asking that I be sacked, causing great embarrassment to the Prime Minister, to the Finance Minister, my idea. If you want, I'll repeat the idea, but I won't tell you. It's about corruption control, how to control corruption. And on the face of it, the idea sounds a bit immoral. I feel on thought and cogitation, actually, it's a perfectly moral idea, and it's a good game theoretic idea. Actually, I was initially very thrilled because it's a 2-period game. So I thought it's, again, slipping in one word, sub-game perfection in practice is very rare. I would do that. I wrote it up in complete words, so I won't go into the details of the idea. The naive part was I posted it on the Ministry of Finance website, where the economic idea space, I was the boss. There was no clearance needed from anyone. So my idea posting was very easy. That was naive in the sense I wouldn't have done it maybe 6 months later as I was becoming a bureaucrat. But thank goodness I did it. I'm still hopeful that someday it'll be changed, because there are other countries which follow the kind of policy I was recommending. So I posted it, and this caused a furor. And there was one encounter with the Prime Minister over there, which I should mention. There was Barkha Dutt, who phoned me over a weekend wanting to interview me. And there was a lot of shouting and screaming I should be asked to leave government. I had decided that if I'm told to take that paper off the website, I would of course do it. I'm a civil servant reporting. I would take it down, but I would go back to my academic job. The evening Barkha phone was one of those, for me to come on television, and one of the screaming matches it would be. I thought maybe I should ask the finance minister and the prime minister whether I should do it, because that would churn up debate, explain my ideas. Pranab Mukherjee, if I remember right, was away in Vietnam that evening, couldn't contact him. It was a weekend. I phoned Dr. Singh's residence. Someone picked up. I said that I know already I've given a lot of grief to the prime minister. He's had to answer on my behalf. Should I go on television and explain my idea better? So that person said, let me talk to the prime minister. 10 minutes later, Dr. Singh came on the line. And I explained to him, there's a television debate. I feel like going, but I know that the government, members of parliament have written to you about me on this. Should I churn it up or be quiet? So his first thing was, he said, Kaushik, I know about your idea, and let me tell you, I disagree with it. Yeah. So I said, Dr. Singh, actually, I can explain to you, you've probably not read my paper, but newspaper reports. So it was 3-4 minutes of little disagreement, but how much can you argue with the prime minister? So I kept quiet, but then he added something which made me feel very good. He said, though I disagree with you, your job as an advisor is to bring ideas to the table. So you should feel free to discuss it on television and explain the idea, even if it is not the idea that I would put forward. I thought that was actually very remarkable. And later on, I remember in a G20 meeting, when I was telling other G20 people about this incident, they were saying actually outside of advanced rich economies, there are very few economies where an advisor would be given this kind of space, which we had in India. And that was giving India a global stature. Yeah.
That's really good to know. That you had this space from our prime minister at the time. There was another idea that you mentioned in the book probably from your World Bank days, which was on the ease of life for ordinary citizens. So, I mean, we know there is this ease of doing business measure already, and you had suggested this ease of living. Can you expand a bit on that?
Yeah, this you'll appreciate, and people who live in different countries will appreciate. Ease of doing business, most people in the audience will know, but very quickly, the World Bank produces, as you know, annually, how easy is it to do business in a country? So how long does it take you to get permission that you need to start up your business? How long does it take you to clear your goods from the port after imported goods have arrived? The World Bank calculates data on these. So small businesses interface with the government and ranks up countries. India usually does very poorly on this. As you would expect, the bureaucracy is very cumbersome. On the ease of doing business, it ran into controversy after I left the World Bank. I'll tell you one thing in its favor, and one criticism is it's very honestly done. So exactly the same criterion taken to, in my time, 189 countries, I think 190 countries now. So it's very expensive. Teams would go, would collect that information and put that together. Now, the weakness is some of these are conceptually weak. Why is something good? Labor laws, one kind, why is it good? Why is not the other one good? So there are those flaws, but it's done very honestly. That is it. One thing which, as an Indian living in America, struck me is one very big difference between India and United States, and even more with Europe, is ordinary citizens' interface with government is very time consuming in India. Doing your income tax returns, doing your getting a driver's license in those days, they'll give you a run for your money, ask for bribe, etc. So instead of looking at how easy is it for small businesses to function, how easy is it for ordinary people to get their interaction with government, which they are supposed to get, even if you're supposed to get free medical services, how much effort is it? So I called it the living life index, like doing business index, living life index. And actually I had a meeting with Bill Gates in Seattle when, since the Gates Foundation would give the World Bank some money for the ease of doing business, where I floated this idea, and it needed a lot of money. So, and Bill Gates was very interested in two parts of it, the agriculture part and health part, but not other parts of it. But I was very keen, had lots of meetings, because I feel for a country to prosper, people should first of all have faith in government. You should be able to trust government. When a police person walks up to you in the street, you should feel good the police has arrived and not nervous that you're going to be asked for a bribe. These are not economic conditions. These are sort of moral compasses in human beings. You want that. And this index would create some pressure. But Amrita, I started this work in my last year at the World Bank. And World Bank bureaucracy is also comparable. So it was moving so slowly, it never happened. So it's remained on paper.
That's very sad, because I think that's truly a really good idea for countries to have. So we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to move on to some questions that I think are really important. Actually, so coming to your World Bank experience now, the whole idea of development and growth, and on which the World Bank at least is predicated, giving advice to countries on how to increase growth. There's been a lot of pushback recently from non-mainstream economists who write more for the for policymakers, like Mariana Mazzucato and Dambisa Moyo, and even recently Joe Stiglitz has written about why GDP is no longer fit for purpose as a measure of growth. So what do you think is the role of the World Bank, given this new reality that we are in?
Joe Stiglitz, since I do have a lot of interaction, is quite a sophisticated position, and actually I have a lot of sympathy with that. And even Mariana Mazzucato and De Moyo, these are people whose works I know, written works, but I don't know them directly, whereas with Stiglitz I do interact. So I have a lot of sympathy that it should not be GDP based. And this actually, the early work goes back to a lot of Amartya Sen's work on multiple criteria. You judge society by the Human Development Index. So apart from GDP, there are other things you're looking at, and you create an overall index. I do believe that is important. At the same time, GDP is a very well constructed measure. I mean, the weights are by prices, which has a meaning and a theory, but we should not get obsessed with that. I do believe society should be valued in terms of multiple criteria, and these are really welcome that these pressures are brought to this. And one thing which I did do at the World Bank, this was again when I came in as Chief Economic Advisor, the World Bank President asked me to put down 2 mission statements of the World Bank, 2 sort of major goals. Poverty eradication has been there for a long time. I brought in a new goal, which was actually very controversial, that we evaluate countries not by GDP, but by GDP per capita or well-being of the poorest 40%. So you compare India and China not in terms of GDP per capita, but how the bottom 40% is doing. India and United States with the bottom 40% of 2 countries, bit of a Rawlsian idea, Gandhian idea, look at the bottom end. And this was very controversial in the beginning. And the World Bank told me that, you can't get this passed because World Bank would give it publicity, that this is what we are doing. And now every year the World Bank puts out a report on the bottom 40% of every country. I was very fortunate again. If it was Trump's America, I would not have got it through because the big countries play an important role. I went to the Treasury, met with them. This was Obama's United States. And I told them that as soon as we begin to put out this data, America will not look good. America's bottom 40% does much worse than European bottom 40%. You will lose out. But they were fine. And I did tell them that America has other strengths. So don't have an inferiority complex. Allow us to put out data where America will come out poorly on this. You talk about your other good things. We got the green signal from United States. I was talking to my Indian counterparts. We got from the big countries and we began moving. World Bank puts that out. But one thing, Amrita, a larger question I will point out, this, I think Joe Stiglitz is very sensitive to it. Many of these ambitions about a better world, it's very easy to foolishly aspire to that world and create a worse world. And the biggest example of that is Russia. I mean, before 1917, the ambition in Russia was a noble ambition. It's a much more equitable society. People share wealth and everything. I feel some of those early ambitions were noble ambitions, but the path taken was utterly foolish, and where Russia ended up is the worst form of crony capitalism. 3-4 big business houses captured Russia. So it was the idealism which led to that, and I feel a lot of progressive idealism, unless you do it with hard-headedness, and there may be situations in life where you'll say that that target is noble, but it's impossible. So may as well sit back, look the other way. You can't get there to that beautiful world. And with a lot of radicals, and right from my college days in St. Stephen's, I had friends who joined the Naxalite movement, which in fact, I should tell you that it was predominantly, there were three groups of students in the Naxalite movement. There were Punjabis, Bengalis, and Assamese somehow. It was a group of this cluster. Some of my closest friends, some of the most noble human beings who joined the revolution to create a better India. But I don't think they had a blueprint. Even if they had succeeded, it would get captured eventually. So the blueprint is important. So Mariana Mazzucato, others, the sort of world that they are aspiring for, you do need the hard hat, which economists put on, but there are lots of wicked economists who don't have these noble aims. You want good economists with these noble aims, but the hard hats to do the analysis and see, is it possible? How do we get there?
So in other words, you're still a believer in the market, right? Okay, so I just a last question on India. So, you know, India, the most famous economist in India used to be in micro theory, which is also was also your subject. But most recently, you know, it's been taken over as is the rest of the world with the data analysis and you know, causal inference. And it seems that the methods we learn in American universities are being exported all over the world. So the soft power of American education is really high. Do you think that we are losing out a bit of, you know, what made the Indian economists more Indian? Are we losing out some diversity, or is there something to be gained by not, you know, following this model blindly?
You know, that risk of America exporting has always been there. And this is again one of those inevitables when as it's a big country like America, and America realizes the importance of soft power. It invests in higher education massively, in research. It will have a disproportionate influence in the world. Unfortunate, but it's an unfortunate fact of the world. But you're right. If you go back to those early days, there were lots of very hard-headed people who would do things their own way, and the Indian economy was the economists, that space was a very creative space. No, but that is still there. The nature of inquiry is changing. It's what's done in America is coming in big way. But here I feel, and bring me back to India again if you want, but generally about economics, for the audience, I think on this, Amrita and I are probably on the same side. I do believe that theory played a major role in giving economics the standing that it has. And that getting pushed aside is unfortunate. You do need the big data. You do need randomized controlled trials. Really, I feel the data is making economics a richer discipline. But the stunning insights of David Ricardo discovering something, Adam Smith discovering something, Leon Walras giving a mathematical structure, Arrow and Debro drawing on some of the hardest mathematical results to give a formalization of the invisible hand idea. I feel those have made modern economics what it is. And one of the reasons, this is a bit of a history of economic thought of mine, you know, the Industrial Revolution, roughly say 1750 to 1850, was a very troubling time for the world, very similar to what it is now. At one level, it is technological innovation taking place. The world should be a better place. But because of those sudden innovations, child labor is increasing. The skies are polluted. You read descriptions of the Industrial Revolution. I think it's it's a good fortune for the world that those 100 years were also the most creative 100 years for economics. From Adam Smith in 1776, Cournot in 1838, John Stuart Mill all the way, say 1858, it's 100 years of completely novel insights into the way the economy works. I feel we are at a juncture of that kind. The world is changing, the economic space is changing. Yes, collect data, do that kind of analysis, big data, small data, but you also have to stare at the economy, brood at what's happening, why are things going so wrong, and you'll get novel insights. I'll give one specific thought. General equilibrium with bilateral exchange, which big businesses do. I'll do you a favor, you do me a favor. I feel that's an analytical idea which can give big insights into why the economy is failing or doing well. There are other such things, but You need young, energetic minds to get into that. In India and abroad, and India has been the Delhi School of Economics days. The other day I was chatting with some friends. It was an amazing space. The ideas that were being born in that little space over there, some of the best minds in the world working, it was like any university in a top American or European campus.
Thanks. Yes, I get the same feeling, not only Delhi School, but now a lot of other places in India
I
are
agree. I
just
agree.
as good. I'm going to thank you, Kaushik, for answering my questions and for giving us your thoughts on such wide-ranging issues. I want to leave some time for the audience to ask questions. So I'm going to try and pick up some of the questions here from the chat.
There's something, Amrita, there's something from Kishore Khanal. He's been sending it, I
Yes.
think twice or thrice. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so Kishore Khanal from Nepal says, would you explain how difficult was it for you to work as an advisor to the government and as a chief economist at the World Bank, where it is really difficult to practice economics on a purely theoretical way? Based on your experience on both pure academic and policy world, how wide is the gap between the economics that are taught in the university and that is practiced? And how can that be minimized, in your opinion?
Kishore, I know Kishore's, I'll give you a short answer. There is that gap, of course, but it's a little bit on both sides. You have to be aware that when, as an economist, you go into the policy space, you are interacting with people who cannot wait for months on end for an answer. And I did initially get some rude shocks when I suddenly discovered that an answer is needed in 2 days, whereas in academics, I would spend 3 months working on that. That's the way the policy space is. And I think I very quickly adjusted to that. That was there. But if you're willing to sort of carry the ideas in your head and bring them in, one concrete example I'll give you. The auction, the spectrum auction, Amrita, this is quite interesting, and it wouldn't have happened. The spectrum auction, the government is selling spectrum. And I remember bureaucrats valued it. It's like, for most people, think of a painting that the government owns, the government is selling a Picasso. You get bureaucrats to value it. And in this case, I do remember roughly the value was $7 billion, this spectrum. And it would be sold to the private sector. I went to the Prime Minister and said, why don't we design an auction and do it? Because economics can do auction design like engineers can build bridges. And I also actually named Vijay Krishna. I said, let's bring in people like that, do a design. The Prime Minister was right. The idea picked up, but he said that let's actually get, the organization is very hard, not just a top economist, but an organization that can, who will sit where, do everything can be done. And what we among bureaucrats had valued at $7 billion turned out to be $15 billion it went for. So auction is one of those ideas. So many places you can bring it in, you have to bring it in slowly. There is a big gap between the two, but that's the way the world is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Tina Burke is asking, if the government becomes honest, we look after a huge chunk of corruption in India. So she's asking for your view. As a first generation entrepreneur, I am shocked at the input expected by government employees. Do we expect a business to have payoffs from the legitimate earnings? Black money is encouraged in every field due to unreasonable demands.
That's Sunil Mehra asking.
Tina Burke.
No, I saw another name. So yeah, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, I was wondering if I know the name or not, but that won't change my answer. So let me just explain. I didn't get the full details of that, but it is true that the government's expectations from the entrepreneurship, small business is often very wrong, and that encourages corruption. But I will use this for one important thing about corruption. Is very often to curb corruption here, the economist needs to put on a broader hat of psychology, politics. We need to be aware of this. Whenever we talk of corruption, economists will talk of create incentives. Bureaucrats, give them money if they do it right, punish them if they don't do it right, and create an incentive compatible system. I don't think really that's the way to get at corruption. Corruption control, in the end, a part of it is the moral standing of individuals, the moral compass of individuals. And we economists give too little space for that. Many a time, the bureaucrat does the bureaucrat's job because you feel honor in doing that job. At the Delhi School of Economics, no one ever checked whether you taught or not. You could miss all your classes. But people taught because they enjoyed teaching, and there was a certain honor in teaching. You're doing the job you're supposed to do. I feel this change in mindset is entirely possible. You have to work down from the top leaders, the bureaucrats, the police, the ordinary civil servants have to be reminded that everything is not just money and income. You're doing a job of honor. And somehow if this mentality can be built in, a lot of the corruption can be taken care of, but it's a hard job doing that. So it is, corruption has to be viewed in a broader spectrum of economics and psychology and other disciplines to attend to that. But I agree that it is, even when I was in government, it was a dreadful aspect of it. Fortunately, being an outsider, most people kept it hidden from me, so I didn't directly get to see anything, never actually, in a corrupt act.
Okay, and Madhu Sinha, who was actually my batchmate in Delhi school, she's asking you to talk about the farm laws and your opinion on them. I'll just give you another question, which is from Sunil Mehra, asking about your prognosis for the Indian economy, what needs to be urgently done to arrest the downside.
Yeah, I'll take both. I think this is a Sunil Mehra. I know, I'm not sure, but Madhu, hello. So the farm laws, it's quite complicated. My first reaction to the farm laws was, when I first saw it, I thought it was good. I do want the market to come in and have bigger play. But I changed my mind completely when I started going into the fine print of the farm laws. And I feel it's wrong the way the reform has taken place. And I actually took into, when I first reached this conclusion, one of the most brilliant persons at LSE, a few years my junior, Nirvikar Singh, who's in California and who's a very apolitical person. So I wrote to Nirvikar and said that I'm not agreeing at all with this. And we wrote this joint piece explaining our position on this, which is that, you know, when you are opening up the market and making farmers confront market prices, which slowly you have to go towards that, markets do play a role. But the following thing has to be kept in mind, that the buyers, if you don't pay special attention, soon you will have 3-4 big buyers buying from hundreds of thousands of farmers. And you will get a classic case of monopolistic or monopsonistic exploitation of farmers taking place, unless you're sensitive to that. And I did not see the sensitivity to that at all. And there were certain provisions in the new farm laws which made me feel that it's just playing into the hands of these 2-3 big businesses that will confront all the farmers, and the farmers will get a very bad deal. The consumers may get a slightly better deal, but the margin in between is going to be huge, which will go into a few pockets. See, things like stocking up of food. There are laws in India which prevents you. This was done for reasons, not very well designed law, that you don't want people to speculate on food grain. So you stock up food, prices go up, and then you release. So India has laws on that. If you notice this time, while changing the farm bills, that has been removed. So buyers can stock up. And immediately you begin to feel that this is creating space for a few big players to come in, stock up, and play against thousands of farmers. So I feel it was wrongly done in the details. So the headline looks right, but the details are wrong. And economics is full of that. I can do lots of things where the headline will look right, but the details will be wrong, and completely wrong. You'll get it the other way around. And if you discuss this kind of a law, what India is trying to do, even with American economists, believers in the free market, they will get shocked, because America is very sensitive to antitrust law. A few players being pitted against many players. And so, no, I'm against it. And I'm leaving out other details, Madhu, for reasons of time. Sunil, your general thing about the Indian economy being in the doldrums, it's in a very bad situation, really. Its growth has gone down dramatically, and not just because of the pandemic. From 2016, every year's growth is less than the previous year's growth. It has never happened over such a long stretch ever in India. So it's in bad shape. Youth unemployment at a shocking level, roughly 24% of youth unemployment. And that means of the people who are looking for work, 24% are not finding work. And most people give up. They don't even look for work. So youth unemployment at a dreadful situation. Wholesale price index inflation at a 30-year high. It's inflation very, very high. So will we come out of this? I frankly don't know. Out of this complete pit, we will come out, because it's not possible to stay over there. Like people, when they look at growth next year, when people are projecting a growth of 8%, 9%, 10%. Once you go down by 7.3% and come out by 9%, after 2 years, you've barely come out. So that kind of revival is bound to happen. But will India get into the trajectory where India was? And it's not just the period when Dr. Manmohan Singh and others were in government. It's from 2003 to 2011. India's economy was growing in a spectacular fashion. And India had done something right or wrong, which is early, which is trying to build an inclusive society with free speech, which was a remarkable achievement. And I think India was getting a lot of global appreciation that maybe it made economic mistakes. It is now among the fastest growing countries in the world, and its institutions are like advanced economies, the institutions. Again, even in advanced economies, there's discrimination, lots of things wrong, but you're aspiring to an inclusive society with free speech. India was there. That seems to be gone. Will we get back? I don't know. I am deep down an optimist. I feel India has strengths. India has entrepreneurial strength. India has common people who are, in the end, they may go through periods when they are deluded. But now when I talk to Indians, I have to say my small sample of my relatives, actually, it's not a very small sample. I've got lots of relatives, quite a large sample of my relatives. Opinion is changing. So I am hopeful that people are realizing that we are giving up the big opportunities that we had created for ourselves. So fingers crossed is what I will say, Sonali.
Thank you. So I think that I'll take one last question from here, which is Sukhdev Singh Sohal, who's asking, what is the place of moral economy in modern economics as it started during Adam Smith?
Extremely important. I just gave a talk, and when I was praising Delhi School of Economics, I've just had an interaction with the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, which is again one of those early ideas of space, where I was talking about the moral economy. So I believe having a moral compass does not mean that you become a person just sitting and praying. It's not at all about religious morality. When I speak of morality, it's a morality that can be carried by an atheist. It's a morality that can be carried by a deeply religious person. It's things which are almost biologically hardwired in us, and there are people who feel that the moral compass is there in us. Human beings, through evolution, we have developed. We know roughly what is right and wrong. Keeping your promises as much as possible, being a person of integrity. Yes, you think of course, your own welfare, own income first, but you don't trample over others. These are the kinds of things, these compasses have gone weak. And that is very, very damaging for the economy. And one academic thing, Adam Smith's invisible hand, that individual selfishness leads to optimality, was such a dramatic finding that we forgot that individual selfishness built on, embedded on certain values, norms, morals, critically important, they play a role. And actually on this, I've got some hard economic theory to offer, that those moral compasses, those ethical compasses are crucial for an economy to do well. You can see that around the world. Trust. Francis Fukuyama has written about trust among people. That's not an economic concept, but it's critical. And there's a beautiful experiment done in Israel among two different groups. And the more trusting group is turned out that the Ashkenazi Jews trust one another more than the Eastern Jews. And even in the laboratory, they begin to become richer when they are playing these games because they are trusting one another. So there are these qualities very, very important. And a part of the responsibility is on us economists like Amrita and others to really push this into the foreground and say, let us not forget about these compasses on which an economy is driven.
Thank you, Kaushik. So I think with that, I'm going to end the questions from the audience and let Preeti take over. Just another quick thank you to you for your energy and enthusiasm and the honesty of opinion that you showed us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking.
Thank you very much, Professor Amrita Dhillon and Professor Kaushik Basu, for a wonderful, really engaging session. And it was really interesting, the entire conversation, even though there were bits and pieces which had some economic kind of stuff in it. But yeah, it was all stuff that one understood and that one can actually place in the real world that we inhabit here. I want to now ask Professor Guruptesh Singh to please give the conclusion, the vote of thanks to the two of you. And then if Arvinderji will also tell us a little bit about the session that we have tomorrow and this entire month of August, which is Independence Month.
Thank you very much, Preeti. I think it was obvious to everyone. The talk was just mesmerizing. And I think Amrita just used the right words. Your enthusiasm, your energy was infectious. I wonder how you still kind of keep that high level of motivation in economics and in the development of this country. Your talk is actually full of so much encouragement to the listeners. And more than that, I think I found some of the things that you said about your personality, how to keep your head cool. I like that very much when you just thought that it was good to move out of the situation and just give yourself a free air. I like that idea very much. And I think my audience here, Majha House audience, must have enjoyed your insights into how governments at the top work. Your very close association with prime ministers and like Manmohan Singh and your finance minister Pranab Mukherjee. Your comments on bureaucracy were very perceptive, and I think many of us who are away from the actual seat of power get to know these things through such interactions. It was great knowing this, and I think your entire talk to me was a fountainhead of ideas. You have given in the process so many ideas to the people here, and we thank you all for your presence and your talk and your very enthusiastic kind of participation in the entire dialogue. Amrita, you also deserve a lot of thanks and congratulations for asking very important and very perceptive questions. I think that's probably what triggered Kaushik Basu to say what he said. Thank you very much for all this. And I think Majha House, I would like to say a special word of thanks because they have the ones who have arranged this talk. And I think Preeti Gill particularly needs a pat on her back because she has been able to get you here for us. And on behalf of Majha House, I am grateful to you both and to the Majha House for organizing this. Thanks once again.
Thank you, Dr. Basu, and thank you, Dr. Amrita. It was indeed an enlightening session, enjoyed thoroughly. It was like visiting my college days again. And friends, tomorrow at 6 o'clock, that's 1st of August, and August is full of the beautiful sessions. The first session would be at 6 p.m. tomorrow, where we'll be having Aisha Kidwai, who will be talking about her encounters of Anise Kidwai with Azadi and afterlife in the agrarian India. The topic would be the farming freedom. So please do join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. Please join us at 5:50, and then it'll be nice of you. And Dr. Basu, wish you a good day and wish you a good evening, Amrita, and good night, rest of the world. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks.